All right, let's dive right in. Today, we are getting into the mind and heart of the Enneagram Type 1, also known as the reformer. We're going to look at what makes them tick, what drives them, how they act under stress versus when they're feeling good, and most importantly, how they can grow. So let's start by listening to that little voice that's almost always whispering in their ear. You know, if you've ever had a thought like this just looping in your head, constantly judging and evaluating, you've had a taste of what it's like to be a Type 1. This isn't just a fleeting thought for them. It's more like the background noise of their life, a persistent inner critic that is always on duty. And that really brings us to our first major point. We're going to unpack this internal monologue, this constant feeling of not enough, and the incredibly high standards that are just, the defining feature of a Type 1. Now, the key thing to get here is that while this voice can absolutely be directed at other people, its harshest criticism, well, that's saved for themselves. A Type 1 holds themselves to a standard that is just relentless. They can't just let it go, because for them, doing things the right way, being responsible, that's not just a preference. It's tied to their very identity. But it's so important to see that this drive isn't just about finding flaws. When a Type 1 is healthy and balanced, they are so much more than a critic. They are genuinely inspiring. They don't just point out what's wrong, they envision a better way and guide others toward it. They want to improve the whole system. This is the reformer at their absolute best. So what's really fueling this constant need for improvement? Well, as we dig in a little deeper, we'll see it all comes down to a core desire to be good and this deep, nagging fear of being fundamentally flawed. And this right here, this is the central battle going on inside every Type 1. It's this constant push and pull. On one hand, you have this desire to be good, which gives them this incredible moral compass. But on the other hand, you have this paralyzing fear of being seen as bad, which makes them constantly police their own thoughts and actions, always on the lookout for the tiniest imperfection. And that leads to this huge common trap for Type 1s. They start to believe that peace isn't something you can have now. It's a reward you get later, after you've fixed everything. But here's the problem. When is everything ever perfect? Never, right? So this mindset turns life into this endless, exhausting project where peace is always just around the corner, but you never quite get there. Okay, so how does all this internal stuff actually look on the outside? Let's take a look at how it shows up in their work, in their relationships, and how their personality gets these two distinct flavors based on their wing. So when a Type 1 leans toward their 9 wing, that reforming energy just gets a little softer. The inner critic is still there, for sure, but they're way less likely to be confrontational about it. They become the idealist, guiding people gently, preferring to explain rather than demand. The downside, though, they can end up just swallowing their frustration, letting it build up inside. Now, flip that, and you get the Type 1 with a 2 wing, the advocate. Here, the focus shifts to people. That desire to be right gets mixed with a real desire to help and care for others. Their criticism often sounds like, "I'm only telling you this because I care." This wing brings a lot of warmth, but it also carries the risk of them becoming overly responsible for everyone else's problems. And you can see these traits play out everywhere in their lives. At work, they're the person you trust to catch every detail and do the right thing. At home, things like fairness and order are a really big deal. And as a friend, they are solid as a rock. If a Type 1 gives you their word, you can take it to the bank. Their principles are everything. Okay, now for what I think is one of the most fascinating parts of the Enneagram. We're going to look at the huge shift that happens when a Type 1 is under pressure compared to when they feel safe and can finally let their guard down. So when the pressure really starts to build, maybe from injustice or total chaos or just feeling like their efforts aren't appreciated, that principled, logical Type 1 starts to look a lot like an unhealthy, moody Type 4. What happens is that controlled, rational exterior starts to crack. They pull away, feeling like nobody on earth understands them or their high standards. That inner critic that was once about improvement now just becomes this voice of deep, heavy sadness. And all that anger they've been bottling up about things not being right, it starts to leak out in little ways, a sharp comment, a tense look. But, and this is the beautiful part, there's a total flip side. When a Type 1 feels secure, valued, and safe, they get to tap into the healthy, joyful, and spontaneous energy of a Type 7. This is the Type 1 finally truly letting go. That constant crushing pressure to be perfect just eases up. And suddenly there's space for laughter, for spontaneity, for just enjoying life as it comes. This is their path to freedom, realizing life isn't just a project to be perfected, but an adventure to be lived. So the big question is, how can they find that serene space more often? This last section is all about a practical path towards self-acceptance and learning how to turn down the volume on that relentless inner critic. Honestly, it all comes down to this one single shift in mindset. Their gut instinct is to control everything, to make sure no mistakes are made. But the real path to growth is to learn to trust themselves, to trust other people, and to trust that things will be okay. It's about transforming that voice of harsh criticism into a voice of genuine compassion, especially for themselves. And here's how they can actually do that. It starts with a daily conscious choice. What can I just let be imperfect today? It means seeing mistakes not as a personal failure, but just as being human. It's about literally scheduling fun, not just work. And maybe the hardest one, actively practicing what good enough feels like, and then walking away. After going through their inner critic, their deepest fears, and their journeys to stress and to health, what is the one big idea that a type 1 really needs to hear? It's this, right here. The ultimate breakthrough for a type 1 isn't finally achieving perfection, it's realizing that their worth was never based on being perfect in the first place. Their value comes from who they are, their integrity, their conscience, their drive to make things better, not from a flawless record. And truly accepting that, well, that's the real path to peace.